my diverse roles shaped my approach to advocacy? I think one of the most important things when you are an advocate, when you're in a position to speak on someone else's behalf, is learning to speak their language. And one of the blessings I've had, having had so many careers, going from a professional athlete to a professional artist to a lawyer, all the way across the board, is that I've had to learn to speak multiple languages. And I'm not just talking about, be it Spanish or French. You know, as a lawyer, you learn how to debate and argue a case. And as an artist, you learn something incredibly important to the art of advocacy, which is how to speak to someone's soul and speak to their heart, and how to convey a message. And ultimately what we're doing as advocates is speaking to hearts and minds, and we're looking to change hearts and minds and sort of build a better world through a better narrative. And so for me, the way that I've interwoven all of those things is, you know, really tried to marry this idea of art and policy as one, to see if we can find a really efficient, effective way to push progression and push change, for especially for the people of the Global South. So storytelling is our most powerful tool, bar none. If you ask me, storytelling influences policy, storytelling influences individual action, storytelling can take two neighbors who are at war and turn them into friends, even turn them into family. And at the core of what we do at Soli is very human storytelling. So I think, for me personally, to talk specifically to climate, one of our biggest failings with the climate crisis and facing it has been in our communication strategy and has been in our messaging. So we have situations where we've abstracted up, and we're always talking about 1 degree, and we're talking about 2 degrees. We're talking about large-scale events that are happening across millions of people and significant populations. But we're never really talking about what's happening to the individuals on the ground. We're never telling the very human individual stories of what happens when a village floods. And, you know, not only is there widespread damage, there's also no access for weeks, if not months, to be able to get people the aid they need. What happens in droughts when, yes, there is no water, but what is the direct consequence of that? You know, somebody, more often than not, the women and girls of the household are now forced, well, what was a 500-meter walk, perhaps a kilometer walk, to reach a water source has now become 15 kilometers. You know, and what happens when you are walking 15 kilometers, perhaps each way a day to get water? You are not in school. You're not able to perhaps, you know, pursue your own economic dreams and build your own business if you're so inclined. And so there are incredible knock-on effects that happen with the climate crisis, and we're missing all of them because we're not telling these stories. So with creative advocacy, what we're really hoping to do is kind of bring the conversation back down to the ground and show the direct impacts. Oh gosh, the most urgent challenge. All of the challenges are urgent. I think I may take your question and twist it a little bit. I don't think it's a question of what are the most urgent challenges and how can the Global North address them. I think it's a question of how do we prioritize Global North attention on these issues? So I say that to say, obviously there are, for lack of a better word, you know, the interesting disasters, and there are the storms, there are the hurricanes, you know, there are the tornadoes and the fires and the floods that come, and those come with news cameras, and they come with, you know, correspondents who we watch on CNN and BBC and NBC. But there are lots of smaller things that are perhaps a bit more insidious. And, you know, while it may not be flash floods, there are perhaps slower water issues that are affecting. I know here, for example, in Morocco, you guys are in the middle of and correct me if I'm wrong here, but I believe it's a 7-year drought that you're facing. That is not at the top of global news. And yet it is having an incredible impact. And I say incredible in the worst way, an incredible impact, you know, on the local economy, and in turn, you know, your ability to then contribute to the global economy and the global sphere. So in terms of Global North attention, and I push back on this slightly, because I think we need to stop seeking Global North attention. The Global North, for lack of a better word, have abdicated their moral superiority, to my mind. One big lesson that I learned in COVID, and I know that a lot of people learned, was that they're not coming to save us. And their issues are their issues, their concerns are their concerns. And it's very, very clear that the global north are really only interested in aid in the global south when all of their cares and concerns are taken care of and all of their issues have been solved. And I think we've learned with human populations, all of their issues will never be solved. So we're going to have to help ourselves. I don't think it's an issue of bringing global north attention to us. I think it's an issue of looking inward and saying, how do we solve our problems? How do we build our own infrastructure to address our own issues? So one thing that I say all the time is that we do not have the luxury of linear progress. We cannot afford to solve one problem and move to the next problem and move to the next problem. We're going to have to employ, as controversial as it was, we're going to have to employ the COVID method that we used with vaccines, which was, while we are developing them, we are also testing them. While we are testing them, we are also creating them, so that the moment that we know that they are safe and they are ready for use across the world, the doses are ready to go out the door and start going into arms. And I think a lot of people talk with the global south. Obviously, there's great frustration with the fact that we are expected to almost skip the industrial revolution that the global north were afforded and indeed took and created by using global south resource. But to my mind, the only way that we're going to be able to successfully sort of skip over that and effectively catch up with our development is by utilizing our thought leaders, our artists. And I do not mean utilizing them individually. And I believe this is what you're getting at with this question. Everybody needs to work together. We have to bring our thought leaders together and our policymakers together with our artists to create art and entertainment that is going to go out to the rest of the world and show them the incredible diversity and the incredible potential of the global south, and indeed show them what happens, you know, if they, I say attempt to leave us behind, because I don't think they can leave us behind. You know, one of the big things that's said these days is that Africa's problems are the world's problems. You cannot escape it. It's not possible. So one of the things that we do at Soli and what we're building at Soli is that network and that very intentional marriage of art and policy. How do we use entertainment? How do we use art? How do we use storytelling to really positively affect people's lives?